I was sitting in the living room, a book in my hands, but I wasn't really reading. My mind was preoccupied with other things I didn't want to admit to myself. Hannah had pulled into the driveway at exactly 8:17 p.m., and I couldn't help but notice that this was the third time that week she'd been late. I grimaced, wondering how many times I could let it slide before it became too much. The first few times, I hadn't thought much of it. A late meeting here, a longer than usual conference call there. Work had been stressful for both of us, and I understood. But now, it was becoming a pattern. And patterns, no matter how small, had a way of growing into something bigger. As I heard the sound of the car door closing and Hannah's footsteps on the gravel outside, I could feel that tight knot in my stomach. Oh, I didn't want to feel this way, but I did. The door opened and she stepped inside, a soft smile on her face as she greeted me. "Hey, hun, how's it going?" Her voice was calm, casual, too calm. She was always calm, but tonight, it seemed like she was trying a little too hard to be normal. I forced a smile. "Good. Just reading. You?" "Busy day," she said, shrugging off her coat and hanging it on the rack. She glanced at me, then quickly away. There was something about that, something in the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes, that sent a jolt through my chest. The small changes in her routine, her little hesitations, the faint trace of unfamiliar cologne on her jacket, it was all starting to add up. I'd let it slide, but now I was feeling something I couldn't ignore. Suspicion. I didn't say anything right away. I knew I had to. I had to confront her eventually, but right now, all I could do was sit there and watch her, feeling that quiet dread settle deeper into my bones. Something was off. I didn't know what yet, but I was beginning to fear that I would find out sooner rather than later. That evening, we were having dinner in the quiet of our dining room, the hum of the city outside barely audible through the windows. The table was set simply, nothing extravagant. As I speared a piece of chicken, I couldn't help but overhear Hannah talking, her voice animated as she mentioned Eric for the third time that week. "So, Eric's been a huge help with the new project," she was saying, glancing up at me. "He's got this incredible way of making everything sound so simple. It's honestly kind of impressive." I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. Eric. This was the name that had started to invade our conversations more and more lately. She had mentioned him before, but it was always in passing, brief, professional. Now, it was starting to sound like she was talking about him, like she'd known him for years. "Eric," I asked casually, trying to mask the tightness in my voice. "Is he still working with you on that big project?" Hannah's face flushed slightly, her eyes shifting to the side, before she quickly focused back on her plate. "Yeah, he's a part of the team. He's just really efficient, you know? It's been great having him around." I was beginning to feel that gnawing discomfort again. There was something in her tone, something about the way she talked about him with that spark in her eyes. It was too familiar, too warm, not the usual detached way she spoke about work colleagues. "Right," I said, swallowing the bite in my mouth, my voice turning even more neutral than before. "Seems like you've really hit it off with him." I didn't mean to sound accusatory, but it came out that way. Hannah looked at me sharply, clearly sensing the shift. "We're just colleagues, Mark. What's going on with you?" Her smile was small, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been a little quiet tonight." I shrugged, trying to keep my tone light. "Nothing. Just wanted to hear more about this Eric guy. He seems to be making quite an impact at work." She didn't answer right away. There was that nervous pause, the kind that felt longer than it actually was. Finally, she laughed lightly, but there was something forced in her laughter. "Well, we've just been working late a lot together. That's all." It was the first time she'd mentioned working late in a while, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. More than just working late. I looked down at my plate, trying to calm the unease building inside me. "Sounds like you're really close," I said, keeping my voice even. "Are you two spending a lot of time together outside of work too?" Hannah's face froze for a split second before she quickly grabbed her glass of wine, taking a long sip. "No," she said quickly, her smile a little too wide. "Not at all. Just the office." I felt a pang in my chest, but I didn't press her further. She was avoiding something, I knew it. And the more she avoided it, the more I could feel the distance between us growing. The room felt colder somehow. As the night wore on, I tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind kept drifting back to Eric, to the strange way Hannah was acting. I couldn't help but wonder, was I just overthinking it, or was something happening that I wasn't seeing? something that would change everything between us. It was a Friday evening, and I was sitting on the couch flipping through a movie I'd already seen a dozen times. The house felt too quiet, the sort of stillness that made everything feel off. My mind kept drifting back to the past few weeks, the late nights, the increasing mentions of Eric, and Hannah's growing distance. I hadn't spoken much about it to her, but I could feel the tension in the air, thick and undeniable. Then, just as I was about to turn off the TV and try to distract myself with something else, Hannah walked into the living room. She looked different tonight, dressed up in a black dress, her hair styled in a way I hadn't seen before. For a split second, I almost didn't recognize her. She was glowing, but not in the way she used to, like she was excited about something I wasn't included in. She sat down beside me, a little closer than usual, and I could see the serious look on her face. It was the kind of expression that made my heart race, because I knew this was it, the conversation I had been dreading. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice unusually soft. I turned to face her, trying to mask the tension in my shoulders, but I knew something wasn't right. "What's going on?" Hannah hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress. I could see her trying to find the right words, the right way to say whatever was on her mind. I've been thinking a lot about things," she started, taking a deep breath. "And I feel like I need to explore some stuff for myself, for us. I don't know how to say this, but I need a hall pass. Just for this weekend, with Eric." My heart seemed to stop beating for a moment. I couldn't even respond immediately. A hall pass. My mind raced, trying to process what she was asking. This wasn't a conversation I had ever imagined having. This wasn't what we were supposed to be talking about. "Wait, you want to be with him?" My voice cracked slightly as I said the words. The idea of her, of my wife, being with another man, hit me like a punch in the gut. Hannah's eyes softened, but there was a strange look in them. It wasn't guilt. No, it was something else, something distant. "It's not like that, Mark. It's just, I don't know. I need to explore this without feeling like I'm betraying you. It's just for the weekend and then we'll talk. I love you, but I need to see if I'm making the right choice." I stared at her, feeling the knot in my chest tighten. How could she ask for this? After everything we'd been through, the trust we had built over the years, and now she was asking for this. I couldn't understand it. My thoughts raced, but I had to say something, anything, before I just exploded. "How can you justify this? After everything we've built, how can you ask me for a hall pass? You want me to give you permission to be with another man?" My voice was shaking, but I couldn't stop it. "How does that even make sense?" Hannah sighed, her eyes pleading, but there was a coldness to her that hadn't been there before. "I don't want to hurt you, Mark. I need to do this. For me. You don't have to understand. I don't expect you to, but I need to explore these feelings. Just this once." I stared at her, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I was reeling from the shock of her request. But even as my mind screamed at me to say no, I knew I couldn't control her choices. She was asking for this, and all I could do was let her have it. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the wave of emotions crashing over me. "I won't give you permission, Hannah. I don't know how I'm supposed to. But if this is what you need to do, it's your choice. But just know, there will be consequences. I can't pretend this is okay. Not after everything we've been through." She nodded, a tear escaping from her eye before she quickly wiped it away. "I understand," she whispered, but I wasn't sure I understood anything anymore. My heart was breaking, and I couldn't stop it. The trust we'd built, the love I thought was solid, was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. As Hannah stood up to leave the room, her dress flowing behind her, I couldn't help but feel like the distance between us was already too great. The worst part? I wasn't sure how to close the gap. The house felt empty, even with the TV flickering in the background. I had been alone for a few hours now, the silence pressing in around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already been broken, something that might never be fixed. I poured myself another drink, the third of the night, and tried to focus on the movie I was half watching. But every time I glanced at the clock, the reality of what had happened sank deeper. Hannah was out there, with Eric. I tried to imagine her laughing with him, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in weeks. Maybe longer, I didn't know. The whole concept of a hall pass still sat heavy in my chest. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I felt humiliated. How had it come to this? I had been so blind, so desperate to believe the excuses, the little things I told myself to explain away her changes. Now, I was left with the bitter taste of my own helplessness. Meanwhile, Hannah's weekend was unfolding, and I could imagine it all so clearly. The excitement of the hotel check-in, the rush of adrenaline as she walked into the space that was now hers and Eric's for the weekend. She probably felt like a weight had been lifted, a sense of freedom to explore whatever feelings had been building inside her. I poured another drink, my mind spinning with dark thoughts. Maybe it was better this way, I thought, to let her have this moment. Maybe she needed it. But the idea of her with him, of her experiencing whatever they were sharing, gnawed at me. I couldn't stand the thought of her being with another man. Not after everything we'd been through. Hannah, on the other hand, checked into the hotel with a mixture of excitement and guilt. As she stepped into the plush, minimalist room, she felt a rush of something that she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't love, but it was something close to it. A thrill, a sense of possibility. She looked at the bed, the soft sheets, and felt the weight of the weekend stretching out ahead of her. But as the evening wore on, the guilt began to creep in. It wasn't just the weight of her marriage that hung in the air. It was the fact that Eric, as charming and attractive as he was, didn't quite fill the space that she'd expected him to. There were moments of excitement, moments of physical connection. But when she looked at him, it wasn't the same. It didn't feel like it should have. Maybe it was the fact that Eric had become the person she turned to because she couldn't deal with her own feelings, her own distance from Mark. Or maybe it was the realization that she had been too focused on running away from the discomfort of her marriage, instead of trying to understand what was truly wrong. But as she lay in the bed next to Eric, her mind drifted back home to Mark, to their life, to their history together. It wasn't just the affair that weighed on her. It was the deep, unsettling realization that whatever she had expected from this weekend, it hadn't quite lived up to the fantasy she had built in her head. Back at home, I couldn't sit still. I stood up from the couch, my nerves twitching. I wasn't sure why I was so restless. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was the anger that I hadn't allowed myself to fully feel yet. I walked through the house, staring at the empty space that Hannah had once filled, and I couldn't help myself. I went upstairs to our bedroom and started packing her things. At first, it felt surreal, like I was living outside my own body. I took her clothes from the closet, folding them carefully and placing them in bags. I didn't want to do this, at least not like this. But the hurt, the confusion, it was too much. She wasn't coming back to this home the same way, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. I wanted to tell myself that I was still holding on to some thread of hope. Maybe I was just angry. Maybe if she came home and we talked, it would all make sense. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't about salvaging our marriage anymore. This was about me letting go, even if I didn't have all the answers yet. When I finished packing her things, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the bags by the door. It was done. And no matter what happened next, I knew I wouldn't be able to unknow what I knew. There would be no going back. The distance had already become too wide between us. The door clicked open, and I heard her voice in the hallway, the sound of it filling the empty house. "Mark, I'm home." But there was no excitement in her tone, no warmth like I used to hear. Just the soft sound of someone returning from a trip, as if everything were normal, but nothing was normal anymore. I stayed where I was, sitting on the couch, staring at the TV that I hadn't been paying attention to for the last hour. The silence stretched between us like a thread ready to snap. I could hear her footsteps as she moved through the house, getting closer, but I didn't move. I couldn't. And then she appeared, stepping into the living room with a smile, that same smile she'd had when she left. The one she always wore when she was about to tell me everything was fine. But I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of guilt, that nervousness. The smile faded quickly when she saw the bags by the door. It hit her. Everything that had been left unsaid until now. "Mark?" Her voice was hesitant now, searching. "What's all this?" I stood up slowly, my body stiff with the weight of what was coming next. I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't know what had been happening, what she had been doing. I had given her the chance to make things right, to come back and explain herself, but instead, she had just gone off to Eric. The hurt was a tight knot in my chest now, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I didn't want to be calm. I didn't want to explain myself. I just wanted her to understand what she'd done. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice low but steady, "and I've come to a conclusion." My eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, I thought I saw her trying to hold back the emotion that threatened to spill. Her face flushed, and she quickly looked away. Mark, we need to talk. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Hannah. I cut her off, stepping toward her, feeling the anger rise in me, but I couldn't stop it. I can't pretend anymore. You've crossed a line, and there's no going back from this. You've already made your choice. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. She seemed so small in that moment, her defenses crumbling as she stood in front of me. Finally she spoke, but it was weak, unsure. It was just a mistake, Mark, a moment of weakness. I love you. No, I interrupted, the finality of my words shocking even me. You don't get to do that. You don't get to call it a mistake and then expect everything to go back to normal. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. I've already served you with divorce papers, Hannah. I can't stay married to someone who's shown me this kind of disrespect. Her face drained of color. She took a step back as if the words had physically struck her. You served me with divorce papers? I nodded. I have, and you're going to have to move out. I'm done. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if the shock of the situation was too much to process. But Mark, this is all just a mistake. It's not what you think. I swear I never meant to hurt you. I was just confused and I couldn't listen to her excuses anymore. It was clear that nothing she said would ever make up for what she had done. I can't keep doing this, Hannah. I can't keep pretending that I don't know what's been happening behind my back. You've made your choice, and now it's my turn to make mine. The tears that had been threatening to spill in her eyes finally fell, but they did nothing to change my mind. I couldn't go back, not after what she'd done. I can't just walk away from everything like this, she whispered, almost to herself, shaking her head. We've been through so much. Please just let me explain. Let me? No. I said it firmly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. There's nothing to explain. You don't get to ask for forgiveness after everything. I won't listen to it. She stood there, frozen, tears slipping down her cheeks, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. Not now. Not after the way she had betrayed me. I'm sorry, Mark, she said, her voice breaking. I never wanted it to come to this. But I could hear the hollow emptiness in her voice. It didn't matter anymore. I know you are, I replied, my voice soft but resolute. But it's too late. I turned and walked past her, heading upstairs, the sound of her crying echoing behind me. I knew there was no going back, and the weight of that finality settled on me like a heavy blanket. The marriage was over, and I had finally made the decision that had been looming over me for weeks. As I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the packed bags by the door, I knew it was the right choice. Even though it hurt, I knew I couldn't live a lie anymore. The betrayal had been too much. The trust was broken, and there was no repairing it. Hannah was gone now, and so was the life we had built. The days following Hannah's departure felt like a blur, a mix of overwhelming grief and strange relief. I spent the first few days in a haze, barely able to focus on anything besides the noise in my head, the constant replay of the argument, her words, the look in her eyes when I told her it was over. It was like I was walking through someone else's life, waiting for everything to catch up with me. But slowly, the dust began to settle. Work, thankfully, provided an escape from the constant reminders of the home we had shared. I threw myself into it, working late, taking on extra projects, just to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how much I worked, the silence at home was always waiting for me. It was strange the way the house felt both too empty and too full of memories. I started seeing a lawyer to make sure everything would be in order for the divorce. The idea of starting over, of building a life without her, was terrifying, but at the same time, it was also freeing. The life we'd built had been torn apart, and now I had to figure out how to piece it back together, without her. It felt like a long road ahead, but at least it was a road forward. Hannah, on the other hand, was not faring as well. I had heard through a few colleagues that she had become the subject of gossip at the office. The whispers about her affair with Eric spread quickly, fueled by the constant tension she carried with her. She had always been a professional, but now even her most loyal colleagues were starting to distance themselves. She had gone from the office's golden girl to the woman whose personal mistakes had become the talk of every break room. I couldn't help but feel a small pang of satisfaction at seeing her world crumble a little. It wasn't that I wanted to see her suffer, but in the midst of all the pain she had caused me, seeing her face the consequences of her actions felt deserved. She had thrown away everything we had built for a fleeting affair with Eric. She had destroyed our trust, and now she was paying the price. The hardest part was knowing she had done it for something that had already started to fall apart. I had heard that Eric was starting to back away from her, that their relationship had begun to lose its spark. The cracks in her affair were becoming visible, and she was starting to see what I had seen all along, that Eric wasn't the man she had hoped he would be. I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy for her, though. Meanwhile, I focused on securing my future. I made sure I had the financial aspects of the divorce handled, talking to my lawyer about dividing assets and ensuring that I wouldn't be left with a significant portion of our joint responsibilities. I had worked hard for everything I had, my business, my savings, and I wasn't about to let her claim anything more than what was fair. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself with work, there were moments, small, quiet moments, where the weight of everything hit me. I'd catch myself thinking about the good times with Hannah, the vacations we had taken, the laughs we had shared, and then I'd remember the lies, the deceit, and how she had completely disregarded me in favor of her own selfish desires. I wasn't sure if I'd ever fully forgive her for that, but what I did know was that I had to move forward, and as painful as it was, I knew that meant leaving her behind. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cold absence of her beside me. And yet, as the days passed, I started to feel a strange sense of hope growing inside me. The life I had known was gone, yes, but it wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, even if it didn't feel like one yet. I wasn't sure what the future held, whether I would ever truly get over her, or whether I could ever trust anyone the way I had trusted her. But I knew that I had to keep moving, keep putting one foot in front of the other. The world had changed, but I wasn't going to let it break me. The ink on the divorce papers had barely dried when I began to feel the first stirrings of change. At first, the silence of my apartment was suffocating, each corner a reminder of what was lost. I had thought that once Hannah was gone, everything would feel easier, like a weight lifting from my shoulders. But it didn't. The absence of her was deafening, and every room seemed empty, even though it was just me now. I threw myself into my work, attending meetings, finalizing contracts, making deals, anything to keep my mind occupied. But in the evenings, when the office was closed and the city settled into its usual hum, I would find myself sitting at home, staring at the same walls, the same empty space. It was both freeing and isolating. I had my life back, but it felt foreign. A few weeks passed, and I was still adjusting. I found myself meeting new people, small talk at gatherings, casual interactions at work, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to laugh or smile. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had locked away for so long, trying to keep the peace in a marriage that was falling apart. It was on one of those nights at a mutual friends gathering that I met Olivia. She was quieter than most, with a calm energy that contrasted sharply with the busy, frantic personalities I was used to. She wasn't the loudest in the room, but she was the most present, her eyes attentive, taking in everything around her without judgment. We talked about books, travel, and shared awkward laughs about being introverts in an extrovert's world. She didn't know about Hannah or the divorce, but there was something about her that made me want to open up. Not yet, though. I wasn't ready to share the full weight of my past, not even with someone who seemed to be a breath of fresh air. But it felt nice, this slow, steady connection that didn't come with strings attached. No expectations, no history to unpack. Just two people getting to know each other without the baggage of the past. Meanwhile, Hannah was doing what I had expected. She tried reaching out a few times at first, but the messages were always vague, like she was unsure of how to handle the fact that I had finally made my decision. She'd asked for closure, but what could I give her that would undo everything? I couldn't help but wonder how she was doing, but every time I thought of reaching out, I remembered the look in her eyes when she left. The trust had been shattered, and I knew there was no going back. I heard through some mutual acquaintances that she was struggling with loneliness. Her affair with Eric hadn't lasted long. Apparently, Eric had pulled away, leaving her to confront the reality of what she had thrown away. I wasn't sure what she expected, but it seemed that the life she had hoped for had crumbled, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her, but it was fleeting. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. As for me, I was beginning to find my footing again. It wasn't easy, but I was moving forward. Olivia and I started spending more time together. Our conversations were easy, unforced. And for the first time in months, I found myself looking forward to seeing someone again. I wasn't ready to fully trust, but I was learning to open up little by little. One evening, as we sat in a small cafe, Olivia turned to me, a gentle smile on her face. "You're different than you were when I first met you," she said softly. "You seem lighter, like you've let go of something heavy." I smiled, the warmth in my chest spreading as I realized how true that was. "Yeah, I think I finally have," I said. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope, cautious and fragile, but real. The past still lingered, like a shadow in the corner of my mind, but I wasn't running from it anymore. I had made the right decision, even though it still hurt. The pieces of my life were slowly coming back together, and I was finally starting to believe that I could be happy again. Hannah, on the other hand, was left to figure out what came next. I imagined her sitting in the silence I had once filled, grappling with the reality that the life she had tried to build with someone else had fallen apart. There was no one else to blame now, only herself. For the first time since our divorce, I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. And that was a victory in itself. As I walked away from the past and embraced the present, I knew that the future held uncertainties. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. Hannah was no longer a part of my story, and that was exactly how it needed to be.